Welcome to today's video. Today I'm going to give you a 5-step process to stop being overwhelmed and to stop your overthinking. Let's dive in. It seems like people are getting more overwhelmed than normal. In fact, I would say it seems like to me, what I've noticed is that people are more overwhelmed or seem overwhelmed or anxious or stressed since 2020. It seems like people are just getting more overwhelmed and stressed in general. And so there's a lot happening in the world right now. There's a lot happening in the world everywhere. And I don't know if we're ever going to get to a point in our lives where there's not a lot happening in the world. When you have 8 billion people, there's always good, there's always bad. It's just always going to be that way. There's always people fighting. There's always people doing things. There's always countries that hate each other. There's always people getting elected and other sides yelling at them. And there's always stuff happening. But with a lot that's happening right now, what we need to do is to figure out how to emotionally regulate ourselves. I've done episodes in the past on how to self-soothe and how to get good at that, but I want to just give you a really simple 5-step process to really start to allow yourself to not be so overwhelmed. Because a lot of times if we are not being conscious of or overwhelmed, it kind of takes over to be so stressed and be so anxious all the time. So I just want to give you a simple 5-step process just to really help you out. The first thing is go to your breath. The first thing that I always do, I am human as much as any other person alive. I get stressed, I get anxious, I get overwhelmed. I just happen to have a couple tools in my tool belt that I can pull out and help to get myself out of that state faster than I used to before. The first thing that I always go to is my breath. I do breath work at least 2 to 3 times a day. Sometimes it's for calming down. Sometimes it's for energy. Sometimes it's to get into meditation, depending on what it is, just another tool in the tool belt, right? The quickest way to change your state, you've heard me say it so many times in this podcast, is 6 deep breaths. The breath is always the first thing to change in any state change that we have as humans. So if our breath is the first thing to change, like if we get overwhelmed, if we get anxious, if we get stressed, our breath gets shorter. And as our breath gets shorter, we get less oxygen. As we get less oxygen, we become more stressed out. And so it perpetuates the thing that we're trying to actually reverse. And so the first thing I always do is now that I'm aware that I feel stressed or anxious or overwhelmed, I go to my breath. And I do 6 deep breaths. It's in through the nose, out through the mouth. And when I breathe out through the mouth, it's like breathing out through a straw. The longer that you can exhale, the more it actually slows your heart rate down. So your breath changes, but your heart rate also changes when you become overwhelmed or stressed as well. So by breath, I can start to regulate my breathing and I can start to regulate my heart rate. I want you to understand, though, that if you feel overwhelmed, that is a natural thing. Humans, we feel overwhelmed a lot. If you're feeling overwhelmed too often, well, then you need to have a process like this of doing some breathing, of putting your thoughts down on a piece of paper, identifying the most important thing, getting your body moving, and then just taking the right action. And, what it really comes down to is a retraining process. A lot of us, what we have done, I noticed this when I was younger, and I wasn't really a person that was like, I would say, a high performance person, is I had patterns within myself. And when I would find myself getting stressed or overwhelmed, my pattern was to disconnect, was to do something else, was to procrastinate. It was to not do the thing because thinking of the thing brought in too much stress and overwhelm in the first place. So me actually, the feeling of, oh my God, now I got to dive into this thing, made me think I was going to get more stressed and overwhelmed. But as I started actually taking the action, started doing the things that need to be done, I realized it relieved my stress and overwhelm. And as I started to notice that it relieved it, I started to work to develop new patterns within myself, to take action on the things that need to be done, to not be overwhelmed. And now it gets to the point where, do I have stress and overwhelm? Yeah, of course, everybody does. Anxiety, of course, everybody does. But when I notice them, when I become aware of them, I can't change anything that I'm not aware of. But when I become aware of it, I can change it. So when I become aware of, okay, I feel a little bit tight in my chest. I feel a little bit like I'm shortness of breath. I feel my heart's just pumping like crazy. Okay, I'm not going to let this take control because it's taking control of me right now. I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to be in control of this. I'm going to do my breathing. I'm going to follow the 5-step process. And what you'll realize, if you have this actual process, this practice that you use, you will be able to remove your stress, your anxiety, your overwhelm, your overthinking much, much faster than you have been able to in the past. And that is the simple 5-step process to stop being so overwhelmed. So if you like this episode, if this helped you in any sort of way, please do me a massive favor. Please share it on Instagram and tag me in it. Rob Dial Jr., ROBDIALJR. The reason why is because we only grow when you guys share it. And I want to continue to keep impacting people, keep helping people around the world. And there's people who follow you that are completely unaware this podcast exists. And so if you would share it, maybe they could find it. Maybe we could help more people. And I would greatly appreciate your help. And with that, I'm going to leave the same way I leave you every single episode. Make it your mission to make someone else's day better. I appreciate you, and I hope that you have an amazing day.